Hello and welcome to ICF Minnesota's Meet the Coach interview series. This is a membership benefit that we offer to all of our ICF Minnesota members so they have a chance to share more about their coaching passions and resources that they use with their clients here within the state of Minnesota. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Paul Oppedahl. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for asking. So my name is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami. I serve as the Communications Director for ICF Minnesota, a role I've been doing for 2 years. And I'm happy to interview Paul and share with you more about what Paul does. Before we can do that, we need to go through Paul's official bio so we can introduce him properly. So let's get started with that bio. Paul Oppedahl is an ACC ICF certified coach who wants you to succeed. He leans on his training in transitional ministry, organizational systems theory, and community organizing. An ordained Evangelical Lutheran Church in America pastor, Paul has served churches in transition as well as long-term pastorates. Paul is skilled in leading when clear, goal-oriented strategic follow-through is vital. Paul allies with you in a process that inspires you to honor your work. He holds a BA from St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, and a master's in divinity from Luther Seminary in St. Paul. Paul adheres to the ICF Code of Ethics. Welcome to Meet the Coach, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this interview with you today. Before we do that, though, let's start with the most basic question. What led you to coaching?
Hi, I've been an ELCA Lutheran pastor throughout those years of my ministry where I've done transitional ministry with congregations between pastors, the work that I've done with organizational systems, family systems, Murray Bowen theory stuff, as well as my community organizing. The coaching just seemed to be a natural evolution and a next step. And then anyway, so and basically as I got involved in some of the leadership training stuff, I was invited by Vibrant Faith Ministries to opt into their pilot class in coach training that they were doing, that they've since been certified by ICF to do training. And I was a part of their pilot group to do that. And what I discovered in doing that is that I've been coaching for the entirety of my pastoral ministry. My goal has always been to help people basically live into being their best selves, see their sense of calling wherever they find themselves placed in life, wherever God places them. I like to use, I have my story and my home in the Christian faith, but I've got a lot of cottages, in a way that I like to work with. So I'm very comfortable with anybody and everybody to help you discover kind of how you can be your best self. And I think that's what we're called to be about for the sake of the community and the world. And I just kind of realized that the coaching was sort of a next step to hone that skill that I've kind of been doing for the entirety of my career.
Well, thank you for sharing some of your through, was it Vibrant Ministries?
Vibrant Faith Ministries, yes.
Vibrant Faith Ministries. What a wonderful thing that churches are embracing a coaching philosophy as well. I certainly have not heard of too many programs that offer that. So it's fabulous to me and unique. We don't have a lot of folks within ICF Minnesota who have your background in ministry. So it's exciting to learn that that's a part of what you do. What was one of the biggest surprises in terms or differences, would you say, between being a minister and being a coach?
I would say that a lot of times people live under the assumption that we're sort of here to tell them about the faith and sort of to be an example and sort of share a lot about the Christian faith. And the coaching stuff I see is more of an opportunity to draw that faith that you have been given out of whoever it is that I'm working with, to affirm the fact that that mustard seed that you have is enough, and that there is the possibility of becoming your better self in the midst of that, and to try to honor that, where with a client who comes to me, to honor where they are and encourage them and help them to see where they're capable of going.
I know in my coach certification program, we did have some folks with a different background than usual, but not necessarily in ministry or anything like that. But it's interesting because I think that there are very common skill sets between how you started and then coaching, but there's also some key differences between coaching versus other types of ways of supporting folks to become their best self. So thank you for sharing some of your insights around that. Tell me a little bit more about who you work with and how you actually help them realize their best self.
I like working with pastors. I like actually working with anybody who in leadership positions, who are seeking to try to cultivate in their own lives a sense of effectiveness and getting things done, and the forward momentum and the accountability that is so often acquired, accountability to ourselves, accountability to others, the follow through that we need to just take the risk of trying things. Over my years in the ministry and congregations, nonprofits that I've been a part of, and just in my own life and in observing others, so often we do all this work to kind of come up with a vision and a mission, and maybe we've even got some, the number of organizations that I've been a part of where we've gone through that visioning and establishing a mission statement, coming up with strategic goals, and then they sit on a shelf and the follow through just kind of peters out. And the part of the thing I enjoy about this coaching is to say, how can I help you with the follow through now that you've kind of painted that picture of where the desired outcome that you're looking for as an organization or as an individual? How could we build a bridge from where we are now toward that desired outcome? And I enjoy that kind of thing, and working with people to kind of get those strategic milestones in place and how we can get that done. And I enjoy doing that in a way that helps folks kind of discover their own self and look a little bit more deeply into who they are, and what it is that's causing me to get interrupted, or the obstacles that tend to get in my way from achieving what I'm hoping to achieve.
So I hear that you work with individuals sometimes, but you also work with nonprofit organizations, leaders within the church. Do you work one-to-one with people in group programs? What does the format look like?
Well, in my coaching, in my intentional coaching for the last couple of years, it's a lot of my work has been one-on-one. I am looking to cultivate more of that team. Certainly as I've worked with church boards, my own church boards that I've served primarily, and other committees and whatnot, that kind of coaching mindset has been a team coaching mindset. And that has gotten me fired up to be more intentional about looking into that and cultivating those connections. So I do both the individual and
it sounds like you serve folks on many different levels and at different stages of where they are in their journey. Yep. And I know we've talked about, so when we think of best self, everyone might have a different definition of what that looks like. When you're working with church leaders, nonprofit leaders, what does best self mean for them?
It varies depending on every individual. Every church has its own personality as well. I think that the sense of being your best self looks like accomplishing what you are hoping to accomplish, seeing that you have a stated goal and realizing that I'm actually working towards that goal. And I think feeling like that sense of best self manifesting within one is also there's a certain measure of self-compassion that you have when you can realize that maybe I didn't get it today, but next week I can still get it. And in my my line of work we're all about grace, and we're all about, the reality that we are flawed individuals, and failure is not a bad thing. It's usually, my experience has been where you learn is those locations in life where you failed, and you can learn from those mistakes, pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and start all over again. And I like cultivating that conversation with folks in a way that asks them questions that help them to perhaps better see what it was that caused that mistake to happen in that last iteration, so it doesn't have to happen again.
And it's important that when you're coaching clients, they have a certain goal, which I'm sure you help them with identifying what those goals might be during the time that you work together, but also the ability to give ourselves grace, which I personally don't always do a good job of doing for myself. I'm very good with giving it to my clients, but not always to me myself personally. So that is definitely an important part of the work that you do, both as a coach and as a pastor. Tell us a little bit more about, one thing I've learned in the field of coaching is us coaches, we love our tools, right? We love our resources, our templates, our books, our podcasts, all of the things. Are there any specific tools, resources, books, or podcasts that you use to inform your coaching work?
I found a lot of, finding that sweet spot where, oftentimes in my conversations with coaching colleagues through what we do, we kind of will bandy around this phrase coach sultant, which is kind of a coach consultant kind of thing, and making sure that we're clear with people, that, okay, is it all right if I give you some advice? I don't want to, because my goal is to ask you questions and draw what the best out of you. But there are some of the tools that I've discovered that are helpful. If somebody were to walk into my office and they'd see a whole bunch of bookshelves, and a whole lot of books, and somebody were to say, "Wow, Pastor, you have a lot of books," I learned that my response to that is some of them I've read twice. It would basically, because there's a lot that I probably haven't even opened the cover, but some of them I've read numerous times. And one of the books for the coaching that I often find myself going back to is Karen and Henry Kimsey House, their coactive coaching. And that is a book that I find myself just about what it means to be listening, what listening looks like, what, the fundamentals of some of that stuff, process, balance, foundation, all that. That's just a book that I've gone back to numerous times. I'm right in the midst of reading a book, A Beautiful Constraint by Adam Morgan and Mark Barden, which A Beautiful Constraint, How to Transform Your Limitations into Advantages and Why It's Everyone's Business. And I'm finding that to be a delightful thing. Anything connected with Brene Brown and her concepts, her understanding of vulnerability, and the importance of going out there and it's okay to fall on your face. And that's where the heart of courage is being willing to risk being vulnerable. And so much, I think, of what we do with folks as coaches is to help them find those places where there's anxiety and uncertainty. And it's like, well, and what would happen? What would the worst case scenario be? That's kind of a fun question. It's like, give me your worst case scenario and stuff, and yet you would still be alive, right? So maybe it's not so, you can learn from it, and just so that's another thing I find myself going back to is a lot of her stuff.
So it's kind of funny when you were sharing some of the books that you lean on or have read multiple times. Coactive coaching was my first introduction to coaching through my graduate program. That was how I learned that coaching was actually a discipline. So I think it's fun that there's a synchronicity there in terms of our experiences and the books that we might lean on even today. And for those of you who are watching, I will put links to the books that Paul mentioned underneath the video. So make sure that you check out the links below the video, and also ways that you can connect with Paul outside of this interview. So it's interesting, right? When one of the books you didn't mention, which surprised me, is the Bible.
It's there.
Are there coaching lessons within the Bible?
Oh, I think there are. I mean, one of the most self-differentiated individuals I know in the Bible would be, Jesus. Um, and there's a lot there's a lot of good stuff, and it's I see that in very much it's sort of like the operating system of your computer or your phone or something. It's always there, and it's always a foundation for me, but I'm not the kind of guy that's in your face about that kind of stuff. Again, it's about where you are as the individual that I'm having the conversation with. And again, I've found numerous folks that are, they get a little, apprehensive because he's the pastor, and and I'm like, just so we're clear, folks, I get paid to do this. You're here on a Sunday morning voluntarily. And don't lift me up as any kind of paragon of virtue that way. And we're in this together, and I just enjoy. I've never met. I often like to say everybody has a fascinating story. I've never met anybody who doesn't have a fascinating story. And my goal as a coach is to learn what your story is and see how we can, if there's ways that I can help you better live into that story and the outcome of that story. That just makes it all that more delightful for me. So
I love that you use the term delightful. It is delightful to be a coach, isn't it? Sometimes
it is.
when things
It
come
is.
forward and you're like, wow, that was really powerful, and you just feel like you need to sit in the moment with that.
Well, and that's I am always fascinated. You were saying earlier how, we're harder on ourselves than we are on others. And it seems like more often than not, when I am coaching and it's like, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would I feel about my coaching conversation with Mabel? And I'd be like, it was about a 6, but more often than not, the client's like, that was so great. That I'd say that was an 8 or a 9, and I'm always kind of fascinated how that often works, that the person that I'm having the conversation with is more pleased with how it has gone than I was. And I'm always pleased. It's like, good. I'm glad. I need to take my own advice and show myself a little bit more compassion. So
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. We certainly, like you mentioned, we are all human and we are all imperfect humans. So I appreciate that you pulled that forward as something that you also perhaps need to work on as a human being,
yeah.
Living an imperfect life. None of us are perfect out here. And when you were sharing about, bringing some of your tools as a minister into a coaching conversation, it seems very clear to you what the boundaries are there. And it reminded me of some folks who I've interviewed who were therapists who also introduced coaching into their counseling services. They also have to be very clear on the boundaries between, this is not a coaching conversation, this is a counseling conversation, and understanding like what skill set they're bringing. So I imagine that is a delicate dance, if nothing
Yes.
else.
Yeah. Yep. It is. And it's an exciting one. That's that kind of threading that needle and learning how to do that effectively is something I find invigorating in a way as well, and I enjoy doing.
Wonderful. Well, one of the questions we always ask, because this is a benefit for ICF Minnesota members to be interviewed and to be highlighted on our YouTube channel here. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and subscribe down below here, and make sure to like this episode and reach out to Paul using the links in the description. But Paul, how has ICF Minnesota helped you as a coach?
Well, I've enjoyed getting acquainted with folks in the things that I have been a part of. The continuing ed stuff I have found really helpful, and I want to need to look back and get it signed up for some others. That's probably been the primary thing that's really helped me as a coach is signing up for those and listening, hearing some of those MCC folks come in and share their knowledge and their experiences.
Thank you. It's good to hear that the programming is effective and is powerful. We have a great programming team who works very hard on bringing in speakers and providing continuing education credits. So that's something that we pride ourselves on the board. And I'm happy to hear that it's benefiting you and is providing value to you, because that's our goal here at ICF Minnesota. Now, I love to get to the question we all want to hear, which you've probably answered some of these things, but this is where we really get to have fun with the interview. What are 3 things that we may not know about you based on what's showing up on your website or your social media profiles? 3 things we may not know about Paul.
I've got 2 adult children that I enjoy seeing them find their niche in life. A 22-year-old son and a 20-year-old daughter, and they're kind of finding their way. All the joys and frustrations of what that means to be a parent. I've often learned many times that the advice that they listen to is the advice that comes from somebody that does not share their DNA. So it helps me be humble. I play a little guitar. I don't know if you can see that. My son is definitely better than I am, but I have those 2 to hack around. I like to joke that I only play in the shower, but it's fun to have, and I keep them handy. So if I just need to, getting a little frustrated with whatever's in front of me on the computer screen, I can relax a little bit and play a little bit. I like to do that also. You can't really tell from the screen here, but I am about 30 minutes straight east of Red Wing, Minnesota, in the rolling hills of western Wisconsin, just a couple miles off of Lake Pepin as the crow flies. So it's a very pastoral, in a sense, in the pasture sense. A lot of fields and green, and just a nice relaxing space out here, and you don't get a sense of that. And I've been here in this area for about 4 years now, and have really been enjoying it, and getting to familiar with the people out here and the folks that I am the pastor of. I'm a pastor of Sabulin Lutheran Church, and the coaching is kind of a side hustle that I've been continuing to grow and stuff, and they really do. It's yin and yang, and they dovetail well together, the ministry with the folks and the coaching, and so I enjoy that, and I think they enjoy having me as well. So was that 3? I think that was at least 3.
That was 3. Adult children, play guitar, but please don't play in the shower. That sounds dangerous. At least it's not an electric guitar. And then you live in Wisconsin. So that's another thing to pay attention to. You can still participate in Minnesota's programming, because a lot of our programs are virtual. So we do still offer a lot of virtual events. And if you want to come up to one of our in-person events, that's also an option.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're just a few hours away.
I'm not even a few hours, and I think I can get to downtown Minneapolis in an hour and a half at the most. So it's easy to get to the cities.
Wonderful.
So,
going back to the guitar, because this is my husband has always wanted to play guitar. So I'm just curious, if you could play any song right now, what song would you play on your guitar?
I like Johnny Cash. Hurt. It's kind of a downer song, but it's I like it. I like the existential stuff. A little bit of, Tom Petty can do it. Again, my son is leaps and bounds better than I am, and he could fill up 2 hours worth of stuff just from off the top of his head. And he loves the old time country and classic rock. I don't know where I failed with old time country. I'm not a huge country fan, but my son loves that stuff, and he loves to play that and that. So yeah, but Johnny Cash, Tom Petty, that kind of stuff I would do, I guess, right off the top.
Very cool.
And I wouldn't do it very well, but
give yourself grace. Remember, we talked earlier.
There you go. There you go. I'm
sure you're much better on a scale of 1 to 10, Paul. You're probably higher than you would rate yourself on guitar playing. But Johnny Cash and Tom Petty is what's on your playlist. So that's awesome to hear. So, Paul, for those of the folks who are listening in here and they're like, Paul sounds like someone I need to connect with, how can we reach out to you, or how can we connect with you?
Well, my email, pauloppedahl@gmail.com. My website, pauloppedahl.com. are effective places that you can do that. I've got a Calendly link that people can utilize, and if you want to set up, a session with me, and those kind of things. The first time is free, and we can work something out, and as time goes on for those sorts of things. If it's a conversation that you enjoy, so folks, like I said, I've never met anybody who doesn't have a fascinating story, and those opportunities just to sit down and get acquainted with folks. I enjoy doing that. There's nothing I haven't found about people that isn't fascinating to me. So those would be, through my website, my email, pauloppedahl@gmail.com. If you did a Paul Oppedahl search on Facebook, you'd probably find me on Facebook. So I'm out there.
Perfect. Looking forward to connecting further with you, Paul, outside of this interview. And those of you who are watching this, check the show description in the show notes, because that's where you can connect directly with Paul, take him up on scheduling a phone call with him, maybe learn more about the work he does and whether he can help you become your best self. Well, this has been a pleasure, Paul, to feature you for a membership-based Meet the Coach interview. If you are an ICF Minnesota member and you would also like to be featured in an upcoming newsletter, we distribute our Catalyst newsletter on the 1st of each month and be published on YouTube. Believe me, the conversations go easier than you think they might. Please reach out to me directly, and I'll include my email address below this interview. In the meantime, we'll see you on the next Meet the Coach interview. Take care.